today, on our ongoing series, we're going to talk about intake manifolds. A lot of people just take for granted, you know, there's maybe one or two options, but even on a car as rare and unusual as a late 30s Zephyr, there actually are multiple intake manifold possibilities. So I'm going to have JB kind of go through a few options that he has available to show. Certainly this is not exhaustive. This is, you know, some good examples and good theory. There will certainly be other options out there, but we're going to go at least through some differences and some examples he's got here, and just talk about the different strategies and how you might make a decision on how you want to, if you're going to build an engine, especially a vintage engine. These engines are you know, over 80 years old, so spend a lot of time to think about different opportunities to make enhancements to drivability and power and different things. So we'll talk about that. Here we go. All right, JB, let's start with an original. Let's see how this setup was in 1938. We've got a great example here of an original setup.
Yeah, this is a two-barrel carburetor, which is really all that was required at the time, even though you have a fairly large engine, around 300 cubic inches. Because of the speeds that were ordinary in those days, you know, 30, 40 miles an hour, what you really wanted was low-end power.
Okay.
And that was created with less carburetors, not more carburetors, because if the air mixture is only coming through one set of barrels, let's call them, there's two holes in a two barrel, then the air velocity is actually more rapid. If you pull air through four holes, obviously you're dividing it by a bigger number, so there's going to be less air, more air coming, but slower. So,
all right,
to make it to put it in simple terms, so we wanted a two barrel for low end power. We want it right in the middle, as we see in this particular example.
Right,
and that was pretty common to all engines in this era. So the two barrel functioned really well because it gave bottom end torque or power to the car.
Right, so the carburetor is pretty much centered between the along the cylinder banks here.
Exactly.
And obviously this is a long one because it's a 12-cylinder engine, so it's a
Exactly.
pretty long intake, but
Yes.
people can just probably make out that the intake manifold we're talking about starts right here under the generator,
Right.
and goes all the way across back there where you see the, I guess that's a gas,
fuel pump.
Is that a bowl to just check?
That's just a fuel bowl.
We could check for water and junk in the gas, I guess?
In the gas, but that is the fuel pump, and the fuel pump
I see.
is driven off of the camshaft.
I got you. Okay, so that brackets both ends of the intake manifold, and this again, it's a single carburetor that's got two barrels in it.
Right.
Okay, and what kind of carburetor was that?
Well, this particular one is made for the Zephyr. You can tell that by the LZ standing for Lincoln Zephyr.
Oh yeah, I see that.
This car is extraordinarily original in every single regard. I mean,
wow.
If this was cleaned up and a little bit of attention given to it, it would
Yeah.
be a really high point original car in a show.
Right, okay, yeah.
It may look a little scattered because that's the way the factory did things. They didn't concern themselves with appearance very much in those days, obviously. But,
right.
But this right here is very much unique to a 38. This cover over the generator is unique to a 38. The air cleaner is unique. Carburetor is unique.
Wow, just to the 38 year?
Just a 38 only.
Wow,
right.
okay.
Its own set of parts to make it an original car. And this car is equipped with an overdrive, so that's what that device is on the dash.
That's this thing here.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's what operates the overdrive.
Gotcha.
So that gives it a fourth gear, effectively.
Huh. Wow, okay, so let's move on to other options that people might have had.
Right.
Okay, so now on this table, what do we have here? What is this called?
Well, this is for a Buick Nailhead. This is an aftermarket intake.
And kind of approximately what year's Buick Nailhead engine?
Mid-50s. They stopped making the Buick Nailhead in, I believe it was 64.
Okay.
And it ran started right after the straight 8, which is the engine that we talked about in the 37.
Yeah.
And Buick has a long, illustrious history of making really powerful engines. These Nailheads were used in hot rods, drag racing cars, land speed record cars.
Wow.
They were a tremendously well-designed engine that had lots of potential for expansion and to create more horsepower. And of course, one of the things that was necessary was to have more gasoline running through them.
Right.
So instead of the single 2 in the middle, this Wyand company and a few other companies made intake manifolds you could buy in the aftermarket. Take your 2-barrel off, put 3 2-barrels on, and as we can see, we got the 4-bolt base, which is a distinctly different than what would come on.
So if you hear the phrase 3 2s, that's what this represents.
Exactly.
3 2-barrel carburetors.
In not only earlier engines, but it also occurred pretty much across the board. There were small companies that were making intake manifolds for limited quantities, usually coming out of California. Guys had the ability, because they were small and mobile, to design things for high performance, whereas the factories really didn't spend any time worrying about that sort of thing. It wasn't in their wheelhouse. So
cool.
These guys were really made and designed and to make and test sometimes very rapidly carburetor setups that would augment the power of the engine, because these cars were being used in drag racing, in road racing, in world land speed record competition. Yeah. And they desperately needed more fuel to go faster.
To get that out.
Exactly.
Right. All right, let's move on to the next thing here. Okay, JB, what's next? What do we have here?
Okay, this is another 3-2 setup, obviously for a Lincoln V12, because you can tell by the length. There's no other engine in common usage.
Yeah, it's long and narrow, right?
Long and narrow. And so we had to spread the carburetors out. We want to create a sense of balance, but we also got a generator in the way, and we got to get the fuel pump worked in here. So they're going to be pushed to the middle a bit. Ideally, you'd want them spread out, and we'll see that a little later. Yeah. And a pure out, balls out race car, you're not going to do that. You're not going to worry about that stuff. You're going to put the carburetors spread out so that the fuel is coming in equally. Right. You can see here how the bottom feeds. Some of these were sophisticated in the sense that they balanced the air and the fuel mixture coming in. Some of them just pushed air and fuel in there and really weren't too awfully concerned about performance. Now this is the reason I like this one is because this actually comes off. This top piece comes off.
Oh, it's a 2-piece setup.
They machined it in 2 pieces so they could go in and do the work on the inside.
Yeah, because there's plumbing that you aren't seeing that's inside there, right?
That's everything when it comes to high performance.
I
Just
see.
Sticking 3 carburetors up here is not nearly as sophisticated as access to all of this and having it flow internally, where if you make this in one piece, you really don't have an opportunity to do that.
Right, okay. That makes sense. Very good.
Exactly.
All right, let's see what else we can come up with here. Okay, so JB, tell me, what's the story on this? This looks pretty crazy, actually, to me.
This is made by a company called Max Overkill. And, but seriously, this was made by a company called Howard, and it made racing-only equipment.
Oh my gosh.
They were not at all concerned about building stuff for the street, obviously. And this would be on like a land speed record attempt type of car, drag racing, where they're going 175
Yeah, that
miles
looks
an hour.
completely out of control.
Exactly, and there's no concern for any of the accoutrements that, like the generator and all that. All that's been remoted and sent somewhere else. But this really is to get the absolute maximum amount of fuel into the engine and do it so that it's equal distant, so that each one of these runners right here is feeding an apportionate amount of fuel to the engine. So the balance creates a lot more horsepower. If you have hot spots and cold spots, that's not going to be nearly as good as distributing the gasoline into the engine uniformly over a great area. And of course, the straight 8s were a big long engine, very much the same way that the V12s were.
So, I mean, I can only imagine. So that's an example carburetor that would fit on this.
Yeah, this is the famous carburetor. It was used extensively in hot rodding.
Yep. Okay.
This is a Holley 94.
Okay.
Of course, Holley is a company associated with Ford, but clearly, since this is a straight 8 Buick,
right. Okay.
obviously there's some crossover there. They're not.
So this would, so literally they would have 6 of these carburetors
Exactly. And you see
lined up on this thing, like just
Exactly.
crazy amount. And then, now, I can't even imagine setting this up, because you would need to, you need to set it up where all these 6, you have to balance everything between the 6 carburetors.
Well, you also have, you have to provide linkage.
Yeah, right.
You have to provide a fuel log that feeds all of these carburetors equally. In a little bit here, we're going to see a multiple fuel log that we made for the Zephyr that,
Yep.
tends to that.
Okay.
Because obviously, the longer it gets, the more carburetors, the more complex it becomes. So every one of these has to be accounted for. It's not linear. You don't just pull back and introduce gasoline at one time. You have to introduce it in stages. So
Right.
that linkage that we're going to see here in a minute, accounts for that.
Cool. And so this was a popular hot rodding carburetor that was used a lot?
Most popular carburetor on the planet Earth.
Okay.
Was used and still is being used. This is a rebuilt one that was loaned to us for the purposes of this, but it's very similar to the 97 carburetor that's still being made to this day, brand new.
That's a Stromberg, right?
That's correct. It's made by a company in England.
Okay.
That's based in England, but has a facility here in the United States.
Gotcha.
And that's what was used in our Zephyr.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay, good. Okay, this is impressive looking. Of course, it's dressed up with some custom air cleaners, it looks like. What is the story on this?
Of all the air cleaners I've seen over 30 years, these have to be the finest for this particular application and easily the rarest. They're actually made
beautiful.
So that if there's an overlap or they happen to be close to one another, they're actually finished, as you can see.
Yeah.
So that if the carburetors need to be closer together, then these air cleaners are not touching or preventing that from happening.
Yeah, and they're giving themselves some airspace too, because they're both
Exactly.
taking air in.
Exactly. So
That's
it's
crazy.
filtered air. They're large, so there's a lot of air can flow through them. This is again the Lincoln V12. Very few of these intakes were actually made. Mostly they were made for the flathead Ford V8s and small block Chevrolets and that sort of thing. But Edmunds was famous for making carburetor intake manifolds for people that didn't have a wide audience like a V8 Ford or a V8 Chevrolet. So they would make some of the lesser brands, and in terms of numbers, Lincoln Zephyr V12s, of course, would be in that category. But this is an incredibly rare piece, and it's really one of the most original setups I think I've ever seen.
Wow.
Especially with respect to these air cleaners.
Yeah, those are beautiful.
And this is a later Edmunds, because Edmunds, you notice if you look at a lot of Edmunds intakes, it was very crude in the early days, and then as the company progressed and they became more sophisticated, their name that was built into their product became more impressive and more.
So do you think that logo is actually cast into it?
Yeah, it's actually part of the casting.
Wow.
And
Okay.
then this was polished as it came out of the tooling.
That's aluminum
That's
material.
These are all aluminum primarily. It's the metal of choice because it machines and finishes so well.
Yeah.
And this one has been polished. It's got provision for a number of different things, but it's really beautifully made.
It is gorgeous.
It really is. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What are we looking at here? What are we talking about here?
Well, there were other companies along with Edmunds and Edelbrock and a number of people that made intake manifolds per se, but they didn't necessarily involve themselves with the air cleaners or the covers. So there were other companies like Hellings and Stellings, who was a famous maker, and this is an original Hellings and Stellings. This is not a reproduction. This is the real deal.
Okay.
I found this at Bakersfield drag strip many years ago at a swap meet, and it's
Now,
one of my favorite objects.
What is the era? When was this made, do you
It would
think?
have probably been 40s.
Okay.
Would be my guess. And these are still being made by another company.
Okay.
But they're not quite the same. They're a little bit different, and they don't. Of course, they don't have the Hellings and Stelling sticker, which is underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So these are extremely rare and desirable if you want to have some period correct stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're really cool.
And what's this other thing?
This is an air cleaner. This is a modern production of a stamped steel and chrome plated cover that would go over a 2-barrel carburetor.
Okay.
It's got a little round disc that's the air filter, and then this sits on top of the carburetor.
And I guess that's compact for the idea of having a lot of carburetors jammed together, so they need to be small. Is that right?
Accommodate any number of carburetors because, like you are saying, they're
Yeah.
very small. They don't bump into one another. So
Right. So you have
this could be
many
4
carbs
tubes.
set up.
You could have 6 tubes. You could have 50 tubes.
Right.
I shouldn't say that because some guy will
Some-
do it. But
Right.
at some level, it just becomes ridiculous.
Yeah.
The engine can only flow so much air and fuel.
Right.
Now you saw the 6.2 at 175, 185 miles an hour. That intake would be of use.
Sure. Okay.
But obviously, since we're going to be doing much less than that on the freeway, we don't really need all that. And so what happens is it actually works back against you, because if you hit the throttle in the car and you open up all these barrels, what happens immediately if there's too many of them is that all this air rushes in and it just kills the engine.
Yeah, you can actually run it lean probably if you're not careful.
Well, yeah, because you're introducing way too much air into the engine, and it'll actually stammer.
Okay.
And won't operate.
All right.
And so these multiple carb setups really have to be tailored to the application that you're using for.
Sure. All right, well, let's step over to this 39
Okay.
Zephyr you have here. Let's see what the setup is on this one. So this is a beautiful setup here.
Right.
And so I see 3 carburetors.
Right.
So tell me about this intake manifold on this.
Well, this intake manifold we made ourselves, and we had seen a number of aftermarket ones, and really, since we're high performance people since a long time ago, we been involved in all kinds of racing. And the one thing you notice about high performance equipment that's sold for the aftermarket is a good deal of it really doesn't do a very good job.
Okay.
You know, they're basically there so when you open the hood, everybody oohs and ahs, but that's really not the end all. I mean, it should have some function for the use of the engine and where it's going to be used. For instance,
Sure.
if it's a street car, then it needs to have this wide range of.
It's got to idle well, it's got to start easily,
Exactly.
and
It's
so
gotta
on.
run it
It's got to be able to start cold and start hot.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, this particular setup that we did, we made this out of aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
We started out life with an original aluminum manifold
Okay.
from the V12, which gave us a really good head start. And then we added this plenum, which you see along in here, which allowed us to have an area, again, back to the multiple piece, where you can get in there and have some impact on the inside of the intake, where the business is really going on.
Right,
It
right.
doesn't do any good to send all these air through the wrong channels. If it was designed for a 2-barrel, then it's not going to accommodate 3 2-barrels or 22 barrels. It's
Sure.
really, it's purpose built for that. So we have to purpose build another intake for the 3.2s to allow for more gas and air spread out over a larger area, but we still have some physical constraints. We wanted to keep the covers for the spark plug covers, because spark plug wires, because we felt that they really added a lot, and they cleaned up the wires, which are
Yeah,
these
well, that's
are
beautiful.
These are from a Jaguar application back in probably the 40s or 50s. These are new, but that was where they came from. They also used them on Maseratis and Ferraris and that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
So we have a combination of things. This is an alternator that, if you notice, misses this last carburetor by about
Whoa, that is
1/1000th
tight.
of an inch.
That
Maybe
is very
2/1000ths, you know.
Right.
But these
Super
carburetors,
close.
we use these modern 97s, are really nice because no matter how good you get a rebuild on a 94 or a 97, they tend to leak. That's
Okay.
because they're 75 or 80 years old.
Sure. Yeah.
And these castings don't last forever. These are brand new castings with brand new gaskets, and this thing has not leaked a drop.
That's amazing.
Since we've had it. It also gives us so we can stop messing with the carburetors.
Yeah.
Because they tend to create problems. They were famous for leaking and starting fires and doing all sort of things. So we wanted them out of the picture. But we love the look of it, and the function of it. So we got these new, brand new carburetors and use that in this application.
I'm just noticing how the linkage is set up here.
Yes, a lot of these systems are really dummies.
Okay.
And what they'll do is it looks like this or similar to this.
Yeah.
But if you pull on the linkage, you realize that only this carburetor is working, or only that carburetor is working.
And this one is set up correctly, where actually the middle carburetor starts the work, and then the other two come on as you get into it, I guess.
Exactly, and they come online as the air and fuel requirements increase, and conversely, they come offline when they're supposed to. This is a very, very sophisticated system with respect to a street car, and you'll see this sort of thing on Ferraris and race cars and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because they have to deal with multiple carbs, but it's very rare to see one done to this level.
Yes,
everything you see pretty much was made right here in this building.
Wow.
This especially notable is this fuel log, which if you notice, it has a beautifully finely finished look to it. And actually Mark here in our shop manufactured it.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yep.
Yep.
So that takes a great deal of time and effort. And also, when this is all done, we take it over to Bob Ream at Imagine Injection and have him run them in and fine-tune the carburetors in the application they're at, and then drive the car and see if its drivability is where we want it to be.
Very good. Wow, this is fantastic. Well, hey, that was I learned a lot. Thanks for taking us through your little this little demonstration.
Yes. Okay.
All right, some of you have actually asked me, how do I subscribe and keep track of the videos? Not everybody knows. Every day there are new people come to YouTube, so I thought I'd take a second and explain. If you click on the part of the screen that says the name of the channel, which is BarryTsGarage, click on that, or look next to it and you will see the word subscribe. Click on that. That'll make you subscribed, and it should confirm that with subscribed. Then there's also a little bell. Select that bell to all, then you'll get an alert on your YouTube channel every time we post a new video. We have a lot of other cars that are in the queue, more fun coming up. So we appreciate you coming along, and it helps us if you subscribe and follow along. It's good for everyone. Thanks a lot.